thing I could do. All right, so before we get started, please, will you introduce yourselves? And we're trying to get Sean on the video. So we'll see his head pop up there in a second. But will you just introduce yourself, talk a little bit about what you do? Elaine's done this first, so you're new, right? But maybe go ahead and start and just introduce yourself to the crowd.
Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie Jarvey. I write a newsletter for the Ankler called Like and Subscribe, which is all about the big business of the creator economy. And I've written about the creator space, the streaming wars, the rise of podcasting, all of those kind of technological disruptions of the industry for over a decade.
All right, wait, one more time. What was the name of it? Like and subscribe?
Like and Subscribe.
So you have to like and subscribe, like
Exactly.
and subscribe? That's
Yeah,
so meta.
it's both a name and it tells you exactly what you're supposed to do after you read my columns.
You gotta smash that subscribe button, classic YouTube style.
That's right. Awesome. Thank you, Natalie. Elaine?
Hi there, I'm Elaine Lowe. I'm the writer of the series Business Newsletter. It covers all things TV. We cover the development market, give you an inside look at which platforms and networks and streamers, what they're looking for, what they're buying. Really for the people who are working on the ground level in TV every day.
Amazing. And, you know, during the strike also, you were very boots on the ground. Like, you were on picket line, like, you were out there.
I got a great tan that summer from working the picket lines, the Writers Guild and the SAG-AFTRA strikes. It was a long 6 to 9 months. You know, learned a lot. It was a really tough time for the industry. We're still feeling the ripple effects from that, of course.
Amazing. Thank you, by the way, for your service. I'm serious, for our industry. All right, and now our other talking head is literally a talking head. He's over there. He's live and direct from New York. Sean, introduce yourself. Can you hear us? Obviously, you're nodding, which that's a good sign.
I definitely can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can. Sean,
Okay, very good.
All right, talk
You're
about,
gonna
give
be
us the intro and talk about what you do at the WAKEUP.
Sure, I do a daily morning newsletter called The WakeUp, 5 days a week, covering everything probably you're talking about today, from streaming to sports rights to AI to movie deals, TV deals, movie trailers, marketing, all of the above, new distribution platforms. A lot of numbers. Like I'm a numbers guy, so whether it be Nielsen ratings or revenue or ad revenue or ARPU, I cover it all.
Love it, love it, love it, love it. So you have 3 distinct points of view from inside the Ankler because of what you all do naturally. And I'm going to ask some broad questions, and we're kind of doing fly on the wall as well. So if you do have a question or there's a through thread, please raise your hand. We'll get a mic out to you. We'll figure it out or just shout it out. But we're going to talk about the whole enchilada. So this conference is focused around AI and data. And I think the idea of the disruption that AI has brought kind of on top of everything, and then you add the fire to it, and it was like the trifecta of hell. And I think the idea is when you look at technology adoption, why? And Sean, I don't know, you might have some numbers to back this up, though.
That's the question, why?
Yeah, why? Why? No. Why? And this is my question. Why have entertainment producers integrated their distribution mechanism as digital? Right? You know, this is the part where, but we don't really do any R&D anymore. It's almost like we stopped on the streamer side, and we're like, okay, we're streaming, we're good to go. Let's all focus on AI. And I think the idea here is there any R&D left in Hollywood from a numbers perspective on the technology side, or have we lost it all to big tech?
Oh, I suspect there's a lot of R&D going on the AI front more quietly at the studios and entertainment companies. It's probably not something they want to advertise right now.
But here's the thing, is why not? Because by the way, I think of it also as the internet, right? And I'm an old guy, right? So like 96, 97, things all of a sudden started changing. And we didn't necessarily lean away from it. We actually leaned into it. So is this like a fear and a money thing? You know, and that's the other part where, again, anecdotes, anything outside of the box that might provide some insight into why we're so paralyzed as an industry going through this technological transformation. Sean?
Yeah, I mean, Elaine, you covered this, and the strikes put a lot of this, I think, on the table. Elaine, you probably would agree that, I mean, we'll see what the negotiations are what's gonna be on the table next year. Obviously, those guild deals are up. It's a hot button topic. You know, probably, would you say, Elaine, the hot button topic of the strikes last year? That and maybe mini rooms at the WGA, but this was the thing everybody, and it's a talent-based business, right? We're not making pharmaceuticals or selling insurance. You know, this is an industry that thrives on talent relationships, and if they are off-put by what you're doing, guy, and it's, you know, the repercussions could be wide and large. So I will say that, you know, you look at Paramount's obviously a company very much in the news this week, especially again. You know, when Ellison came out with the initial announcement with the deal, he said, we are a media and technology company. That was how he defined Paramount. So, you know, we're still waiting to see what that's going to manifest in. But I think back to your point about, is anybody doing R&D? Is anybody spending? I think at Paramount, that is, if not job one, it's job two on the Ellison regime, is to get their tech up to snuff. And by that, I imagine that's a lot of AI integration into their workflows. So we'll see about that. So
Yeah, I mean, all Hollywood companies are tech companies now because they're all running these large streaming services. So many of them have had to acquire that technology or build it in-house. I mean, Disney spent a lot of money for BAMTech a number of years ago. So these companies have large tech teams. So I think they are doing a lot of that work behind the scenes. And, you know, again, yeah, to Elaine's point, like, there's maybe reasons why they're not always talking about that more publicly, but Hollywood is risk averse, and you know, sometimes takes a while to adopt new technologies.
Well, and by the way, risk aversion and the idea of Hollywood studios becoming tech companies, right? This is the other part where, as an old guy in the business that's watched a lot go on, that's one thing where we're not gonna all of a sudden change our core competency and become a tech company. Now, Paramount has the best chance now of all of them because of the nature of their relationship. But maybe we shift it to the strike, right? Because ultimately we negotiated. We negotiated for some AI boundaries and all that stuff. But is it about eroding the long-term careers? And that's the other part. That's the scary part. Because
the language was very broad in those resulting contracts from the Writers Guild and the SAG-AFTRA strikes. And in the case of SAG-AFTRA, the main thing was informed consent and compensation, right? So as long you have to be informed about, you know, what parts of you they're going to use. If an AI model wants to use Jennifer Aniston's eyes and George Clooney's hair, you have to get permission from those actors first. You can't just chuck all that stuff in. But the thing is, this technology is evolving so rapidly, it's hard. It's always going to be hard for regulations and contracts to catch up when you're seeing things progress in real time. Like from month to month, it's changing. And so I think that's the tricky part of figuring out, like, Hollywood is just negotiating with itself in real time the parameters of how and when it's comfortable using AI.
Yeah, I mean, think about how much the conversation around AI has shifted since, I mean, even 2 weeks ago, but also, you know, since the end of the strikes. I mean, it's a completely different conversation. It felt like, you know, when the strikes were ending, it was like, oh, AI is kind of this thing that's coming eventually. We don't have to worry about it too much right now, but we should start to put some protections in place. It's here now. Everyone is using it in Hollywood. The conversations, I think, around AI for these upcoming contract negotiations are going to be fascinating because we're in an entirely different place with it.
Well, you said 2 weeks, and the reality is Sora 2 changed everything overnight. And I'm always going back to the old internet, right? Because when we did IAB leaderboards, it changed advertising, and everybody's like, all right, now we know what to do to advertise. It's the same concept. But when you have these leaps, and they're consumer-facing and open, you kind of look at, like, you wonder why people are risk averse. And I guess the question is are you hearing anything about anybody trying to be conscious of this and trying to say, how do I preserve some of these long-time employee workflows, and how do I not? But I don't think anybody's having those conversations because we're in such a rough state from an industry perspective. And maybe that's something also that the numbers might bear out, right? I mean, Sean, I'm going to shift it to Sean. Do you see the numbers really telling the story, and maybe we've just been ignoring them? I mean, in terms of year-on-year analysis or pre-pandemic versus today? Is there anything that you see in the numbers that are saying, oh, this is why we're risk-averse, this is why we're paralyzed as an industry?
Yeah, I think it's going to be, I mean, the numbers have to come down. We also write a lot about production days and budgets and all the production moving, again, overseas. A big topic there in LA, obviously, we write about consistently. Film LA just dropped the release numbers for Q3, and it just keeps going down. And one of the things, it's budget. So, I mean, that's what the numbers you're talking about there. And the goal of these AI tools is, not to say we want to replace humans, or it's budgets, and you have to get these things down. If box office isn't going to give you as much as it was giving you in 2019 or 2017, but you still want to make movies and you want to make them in LA or make them in America, you got to find the money somewhere. And I think that's what the focus is, and probably more in a post-production bent. Again, a lot of the guild stuff that Elaine covered in the strikes was very much on the writers and the actors. But I think the focus in terms of everything that I kind of hear and see is really more on, I'll just say, post-production. How do we get these, streamlining? We don't need so many people for certain tasks, and that's how you get those budgets down and make them work for the realities of the marketplace in a sense. So that's where I'd say, I don't think we've really seen that yet, Guy. And I think, again, Paramount's going to lead the way here. Lionsgate's been early on this. They haven't really manifested yet at Paramount, but also in the ad tech. I mean, another topic, Netflix has been all over this. And yesterday in the earnings call with Greg and Ted, Greg was highlighting this about how they're going to be launching interactive ads by the end of the year, and kind of an interactive voting, interactive, elements to their programming. So again, AI powered, take that as you like. So that's where you're going to see, I think it's more in post and probably advertising at first, and then on-set production, things like that. I think proofs in the pudding in these guild negotiations will probably touch on that, Elaine.
And when we think about how it's used within the writing and acting and directing community, it's not entirely a doom and gloom scenario. There are instances where, and Sean touched on this, it makes it more accessible to the entry-level filmmaker. Natalie and I have covered the vertical drama space, micro dramas, extensively this year. It's a booming market. It's, an interesting area. It's kind of tricky because, it's non-union. They're trying to figure out how to make things at scale on a low budget. But a lot of them are using AI to streamline and to scale up here.
Well, Sean from Darman was here earlier, right, and talking a little bit about their model and what's going on. And this is the part where maybe this is the leadership challenge also in Hollywood that's going on, and this is why there does need to be a changing of the guard, because sometimes you look in the rearview mirror and all those models are broken, and that's where, when you think about paralysis and it's like risk aversion and like, oh, I'm not going to spend anything because I'm just trying to keep my job and keep the ship above water, right? So maybe we switch it to leadership, because maybe there's something also in here, right? Because we have an executive culture that's a little funky, right? Right? We're a tiny little business, but everybody thinks we're this big, right? They all want to think they're a tech company, but really when you put their P&L up against a tech company, it's peanuts, right? So why do you think leadership has become so reactive as boots on the ground? And Sean, you're in those, those quarterlies as well. But why do you think leadership has become so reactive? Is it fear? Is this something also do you think they're looking at it saying like, oh, I'm the silent movies and these are the talkies and I'm not a talkie? And I'm sorry to use such an old school analogy, but thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think Hollywood rewards not taking risks sometimes. So much of this is about, oh, that movie was a success at the box office, let's just make another, or let's make...
It's like the music business, by the way, yeah.
Exactly, it's like we'll make a sequel, or we'll make a spin-off, or, another studio will say, oh, we'll just see if we can kind of make our own version of a, movie with a bunch of fast cars and people racing each other, or whatever it happens to be. So it's hard sometimes for executives to stick their neck out and, advocate for something that there's not a comp to show that it can be successful.
Well.
Now, when you do it well, you're hailed as, a hero. And we're seeing that right now with Mike and Pam at Warner Brothers. They took some big risks this year that paid off. But before those risks paid off, everyone was calling for their jobs. So, that doesn't breed a culture of people wanting to take chances and try new things. And you do have these people who've been at the top of their game for a long time. And so much of this job still is about, like, who's got the taste. And when you're the person leading one of these companies and you've been told you've got the taste, you can make the movie a hit or the TV show a hit. Why are you going to suddenly cede control of that to some 35-year-old who, thinks that they know what people want to watch?
Or an LLM that says this is what we should be doing. Elaine, you were going to say something?
And that's why you're seeing so much growth come outside of the traditional studio space, which Natalie covers in depth at Like and Subscribe. You see the growth of the creator economy, which Natalie could more capably speak to than I can, about all the risks people are taking with their YouTube channels, with the empires that they're building through networks. They don't need a Disney, they don't need a Netflix. It's a nice bit of street cred to have, but it's certainly not, it hasn't stopped Mr. Beast from empire building.
Yeah, when you're making 5 YouTube videos a month or a week in some cases, you can afford to take a risk and try something. It's pretty cheap. You're not spending 3 years on a movie that's, multiple tens of millions of dollars and may or may not be a hit when it comes out. So, I do think a lot of the risk taking has moved to these newer platforms where people can be a little bit more nimble and try things, without, wrecking their whole business.
This also comes back to my whole thing of like, it's art. Now, you may not think that creator is art, you personally, but that creator gets up every day, has a passion. It's not just all about numbers and followers and subscribers. They're telling their story. They found their unique angle, like, oh, I'm the guy that rides around on a motorcycle with a microwave on my head, right? So when they find that, though, and then when they create the content, it's creatively inspired. And by the way, I've had like Zach King and stuff on, and it's like they use our techniques to storyboard and get to that creative inspiration collaboratively as a team, but it's still, they think it's art. And I'm like, it is art to you, and it should be considered art. And that's where I'm like, who's going to start making bold creative decisions again like we did around our art? And that's what I'm so scared of in the paralysis of this, what are we going to do? We don't know. But by the way, go back to art. It always wins. I'm sorry, I'm now waxing eloquent.
It is art. I will say it's art, and they think of it as art, and it is. But also, they have an incredible data tool set available to them. I mean, when I talk to YouTube creators, it's fascinating. In fact, I've talked with Sean Atkins from Darman and Darman himself about this at various points too. Like, they are so in the weeds on data, and I know creators who are hyper focused on the exact right thumbnail that's going to get someone to click on their video, or how do they really engage people in the first 30 seconds of their video, because that's the most important, or how do you get someone to watch a 2-hour video, because that's what YouTube prioritizes now, is engagement. And I do think that gives them a lot of tools to figure out how to not just make art, but be successful at it. And at the end of the day, everyone in Hollywood wants to be successful making art too. It's not always just art for art's sake, and that's the same with creators that I talk to on a regular basis.
I just had a thought too. Like, are those the new studio notes? Right, because they're not going to get into the creator and be like, oh, what are you going to have for breakfast this morning? It's like it's their life. You're in your room, but maybe that's the new studio note where it's like, okay, we see this. What do you think about it? You need to know about it. I don't know. It's interesting. It's fascinating because, look, the other thing also is we talked a little bit about this whole conversation also has been circular because we're back at the technology gap, right? Now we start talking about M&As and inspiring, right, through leadership of where are we going, and honestly, the creator economy is doing it. They're branching out into more ways than ever. They're finding new ways to get eyeballs onto their device, and some of it's not just all straight YouTube. It's also all the deals and the ties. Oh, I'm a YouTuber, but I'm not a TikToker. Oh, I'm a Facebook video person, but I'm not a YouTuber. But it's all converging into one super stream. And that's the part where it's fascinating because the numbers are going to end up bearing out because they're making a good living.
Well, and what I find fascinating about the creator space is, sure, the YouTube videos, YouTube AdSense, TikTok sponsored deals, those are kind of the bread and butter of how they make money, but there are all these other ways that they make money on top of that Hollywood could take a lesson from. Hello? I mean, some of these things are things that Hollywood pioneered, merch, live experiences, things like that. But then I know creators who are making a ton of money on TikTok Live where their fans send them roses, and every time that happens, they get like 10 cents, and you get enough of those roses, and suddenly you've got a couple $100,000 from one, 2-hour TikTok video. Or there's creators who make make money on courses. You know, gin up a course, you put it up online, and you can make millions of dollars for the, 1 week of your life that you spent recording those videos. And there's so many interesting things that they're doing, and I do think, it's worth it for Hollywood to spend time unpacking some of those ways that creators are able to connect with their audience and engage them to purchase off platform. And, how can we do that around big, franchises and IP and,
These are taboo also in Hollywood, or constrained by the massive IP of scale, right? I watch a dog groomer out of Niagara Falls, right? And she has her own brand of dog shampoo, and she does great. That's a whole other revenue stream for a YouTuber. But you talk about doing that in a studio system, and you talk about that with big brands, it's all...
Now, hold on. I mean,
Okay.
Disney has really perfected the art of cross-pollinating, of creating merchandise around a franchise, turning it into a theme park amusement. I think you see Netflix catching on to some of that with K-pop Demon Hunters, now that they're scrambling to get together all their consumer products for Halloween, for the holidays. There's an opening there still in that area.
Well, and honestly, that's the other thing is how do you break out of the box? Because some of it is also, again, risk-averse executives. We'll never do that, right? And I've heard that a few times in this town, right? And then cut to 7 years later, and it's like, oh, you're doing it because it works. So that's the other thing is Elaine, your boots on the ground, you talk to people. Do you think it's softening? Do you think people are like, we have to do something? What do you feel like the tone is in the town? Or is it segmented based on what you do?
I talk to a lot of people who are in the business of buying and selling TV shows, writers and producers on one end, people at the networks and studios on the other. I think the sense of optimism has definitely risen. There was I would say, a misplaced sense of optimism coming right out of the strikes in 2024. This year, we're actually seeing things in development, in production. By all accounts, when I talk to agents and producers and writers, you are seeing that volume increase, but there's always the caveat of, but, it's growing at a measured pace because we're coming from that place of, 600 scripted TV shows in 2022. We're coming down from peak TV. The consensus is that was a bubble. We were never supposed to be there in the first place. But what the new normal is still a question mark. And you see that on the unscripted side, too. We've been running a series on non-scripted TV on Series Business this past month. And, there's, first of all, we don't even know what that number is. It's probably several times 600. There's no equivalent of John Landgraf out there counting how many non-scripted shows there are. But there still is a lot of appetite. I think where you're seeing innovation is how they're financing these shows. Some of them are bringing in brands, like brand-funded entertainment is big, where you can bring a brand in, but that means they have a seat at the development table. You're giving them a say in the creative process. This is the kind of push and pull of, if you want to pursue a show in 2025, 26, this is what you have to do to get it made.
Well, and look, sometimes it takes complete destruction to take the silos down, and we complain for so many decades about how siloed we were, and I have hope that maybe this is a new portent to be like, okay, maybe this is going to shake out in an organic way, but it takes the decimation, the ground zero of it all, to be even open to some of those ideas. And Sean, I kind of look at this because we are here in town, right? And you see the effects, in your face all the time. But this is a global industry, right? Do you see any other indicators where, like rest of world from a financial perspective, that other people are also taking the opportunity, seizing it, and making money from it? I mean, is there anything that is stuck out in your quarterlies, maybe? That is like, oh, that's very interesting. More people need to know about that. And I have an example, but I don't want to share mine yet. But
The floor is yours if you got something, please.
Well, no, like Ryan Coogler getting copyright reversion, right? A director is a big deal, right? In the heady space of who owns IP and whatnot. Like I saw that as that's a new kind of bellwether. Like Spielberg would have gotten it after Jaws in 76, right? That idea that. And I kind of look at those types of things. There's something that will come where it's like, okay, are we going to share a little bit more in the revenue? Because the studio system is, we make the 80%, you make the 20%. So I don't know, is there any talk around any of that on numbers, or is it all just full steam ahead? We need to keep making these strategic investments, and we need to keep cutting jobs in order to stay in the black.
Yeah, in terms of ownership, I mean, leverage is always, you look at George Lucas or someone like this, isn't exactly a new concept in Hollywood per se. It's nice to see it's still there, and Ryan was a one-off deal there. I would say globally, look, we look at the numbers. We're going to get some fresh numbers over the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks in earnings season in terms of, the streaming business, the numbers that we still thankfully get. And that's going to be, the growth is generally not in America. The growth in streaming, which is the future of this business from a TV, point of view, video point of view, it's internationally. So the investment, and this is where Netflix has exceeded. People ask, kind of, why is Netflix winning? Why is Netflix, making, $2.5 billion, a quarter in net profit when everybody else is struggling to make a couple $100 million here? Because they're a global player. It's not just the U.S. is important. The U.S. is 44% of their revenue. But that's the growth is coming from those other sectors, and they're investing in those sectors and using these, AI tools, not just to do post-production in America. Those are global tools. And I think that scale you're talking about, guys, like the real money is in doing it globally, not just focusing on America. Because once you have a tool, you can put it out. It doesn't matter if it's shot in French, if it's in Spanish, if it's, in APAC, whatever, So that's the mind game you have to put on this. And back to Paramount, they have had a mixed record in this. And again, this is the thing that Ellison sees, I think, and what he's looking for with perhaps the WBD deal. WBD is more global, is you got to have the tonnage to make that tech amortize the cost of the investment of the tech and be a global player in that sense. So Netflix has, again, like, give them props all the time, whether that be what Elaine was saying with K-pop. They looked at this thing and said, hey, why don't we put it in theaters? We're going to do this for every movie? No, but this would be fun to do. They iterate, guy, and they're, it's essential entrepreneurialism that will win out. And people who are just doing cut and paste and, as Natalie said, we're going to run it back 3 times on a sequel, and we're not going to really create new ideas. You're going to be caught, hanging out in the wind there. So that's the key, I think, back to executive leadership that you're talking about. The people that, really iterate and get in the trenches on everything, not just like we do this across all shows or all movies. They go look at a property and say, this is where the opportunity is, whether that's merch or whether that's, an event or IRL or whatever it might be. That's who's going to really, persevere no matter where the tech or the AI developments go. It's that mindset guy that really matters and will shine and win out in the end.
All right. And look, we only have a couple minutes left, so I just wanted to throw one last one out there. And it's more around, okay, we know the streamers are, they've lost us money, and it's like I keep waiting for like, we're profitable, and a couple people are a little profitable, but the reality is people are still losing money on streaming, right? We know what the theater is doing, right, in terms of the actual theater, and we've got 30,000 screens, and they sit empty for 5 days of the week, and then maybe they get a couple of good shows, and we turn some money. But that's also not very rosy. And then you throw AI onto the top of that, and it's like, we don't even know where we're going to go or what we're going to do, really? Because we're still looking in the rearview mirror for inspiration, but it's not being driven by money, right? Because it's all pain. Well, you've mentioned a couple highlights. But my question to y'all is, and we've sat here a couple years in a row, and I'm like, all right, what do you think next year is going to be like? And this is the idea where I still have hope. Somebody asked me in a parking lot yesterday, like, how do you still have hope? And I was like, many reasons, right? Even I have hope in the youth as well, right? Which a lot of people are like, But what do you feel that this is recoverable? Do you feel that what is your take on the next year? And do you feel like we're going to be sitting here next year and be like, we're out of it? How long do you think it's going to take? So it's open-ended and broad, and this is the last question of the session. So tell me your inner thoughts.
Inner thoughts.
Sorry, that's terrible.
Well, the next year is going to bring us a few more labor negotiations. We're coming up on that cycle again with the Writers Guild and SAG-AFTRA. So we'll see how much leverage they have to pursue what they're looking for when it comes to parameters on AI, building in further guardrails around that, trying to sort out their own comfort level and their members' comfort level for that. But I'll say, when I'm usually the person asking that question, the thing I hear, and it sounds so trite, but I guess it's true, is that people will always need storytelling, right? Like, how many times have we all heard people say that? People will always need storytelling. You're always going to need someone to make the TV shows and to make the movies. I think the question is just, in this period of right-sizing, where is it all going to shake out? And I think there's also a very valid question as to whether M&A is the route to get there, because with M&A usually comes layoffs, and that's not a good time for the industry.
I'll leave us on a little glimmer of
Hold
hope.
on, hold on. Let me get Sean's thoughts because I
Okay.
want to leave in person. But Sean, again, studying the numbers, you see macro trends also, just in terms of the massive amount of data that you're analyzing. And I'm sure you've put it into an LLM and asked some questions.
I do not. I'm a human.
Oh, all right. Are you a
100%,
purist?
So I can guarantee that.
Okay, good. Good. That's good to know.
I've yet to hear a pitch where someone's explained to me where it's going to save me time. I have to make sure my numbers are correct, and AI is not the tightest handle on that all the time, guys. So I'm still human made.
But what's your outlook for you talked about next quarter, these next couple of weeks. But when you look at 26, is it what's your outlook?
I try to take an optimist. I'm a realist, but I'm an optimist, and I would probably concur with Elaine there. Look, Paramount's going to be cutting a lot of jobs probably next week. So look, this end of this year is not going to be a pretty sight. But my line that I say often is Hollywood doesn't have a demand problem, it has a business model problem. You can solve a business model problem. A demand problem is a lot bigger of a challenge to see. So when I see Sinners, when I see Superman, when I see Lilo doing $1 billion, you can't tell me that no one wants to see this stuff anymore. Now, as our colleague Richard Rushfield always says, it's a business of hits. Some of these are going to work and some of these are not. But what I see on the horizon more, 2026 is a lot of originality back, more in the box office specifically, which I track a lot. So Hollywood's gotten that message, guy, that, we need to have original ideas. We have to, Elaine says, invest in storytelling, new storytelling. You're going to see a lot more of that next year. Hopefully the guilds don't put the negotiations don't put a real, pause on that. I mean, again, you have to fight for what your rights and what you want to believe in, but hopefully that momentum continues in 26. So I keep an optimistic sense. What dominates the conversation and culture, whether it be Netflix or whether it be HBO Max or whether it might be, it doesn't really pick your streamer, but it's, it's the world, the adolescence of the world. These are still the things that people gather around and talk and share. So there's still, is it everything? No, as Natalie says, you can be watching microdramas, you can be watching all this other stuff now, but it still has a seat at the table. And as long as we're fighting for it, that's the thing, you have to fight for these audiences, guy, and that continues. And that's what I see out there is people are really, as you said, but you think about silos. Like a lot of that's broken down. My career is at Warner Brothers, and there's a lot of silos there. I was talking to the heads of Warner Brothers marketing last week, and we were joking about like silos are gone. That's old thinking. You will not survive, and you will not be here anymore if you operate that way. So I see that falling off, guy, and that's what gives me optimism that there's spirit to figure it out, even if there are a lot of challenges out there.
Awesome. All right, Natalie, take us home. I know, by the way, I also have to preface this because this will be it. But the reality is the creator economy is also something that's eking into a lot of this stuff. So, we're going to invite you back next year. Yeah, good. All right, so take us home.
I spend all day thinking about, writing about, talking to people who work on the internet. And it also means that I spend a lot of time thinking about young audiences because it's a lot of young audiences consuming this social media first content. And I've learned some things about young audiences. Young people, particularly young Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they love to be fans. They want to be fans of things. They also love in-person experiences. They want to go out to a movie theater, to a concert, to an IRL activation with their favorite creator, whatever it happens to be. I mean, 80,000 teens and tweens and their parents packed a New Jersey mall for the skincare line launch that was created by this 15-year-old YouTube star. So, they are consuming content. It's different than what Hollywood's making right now, but it's entertainment to them. They're also watching micro dramas and, they're on Instagram and TikTok and all these platforms. So Hollywood has to figure out how to harness that and how to adapt to kind of this new way that young people want to consume and engage with entertainment. It'll be painful, I think, to get there, but eventually I think they will get there because, to Elaine's point, everyone wants stories, everyone wants entertainment.
They have to trust them as a storyteller outside of their childhood experience or whatever. You know what I'm saying? But they do have to trust Hollywood as a storyteller, and I think that's what really needs to come. All right, we're over. I'm so sorry. This was amazing. Thank you, ladies, for being here live in person. Sean, thank you for joining us via satellite from your Connecticut home or wherever you're at. Yes, please give him a round of applause, and I hope you'll come back and join us next year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.